Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Monday. This is Seattle Now. Welcome to Phase 2, Seattle. You can eat in a restaurant again starting today. Not so for many other parts of the state, and that's irritating some of the governor's political allies. There's also that contagious new strain of COVID that might knock us back to Phase 1 any day now. We'll talk about all of it with KUOW Olympia correspondent Austin Jenkins in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Mayor Durkin wants state health officials to crack down on scarce vaccines finding their way into well-connected arms. This after the Seattle Times found at least 3 area hospitals gave some people, including donors, special access. Durkin says the state should reallocate doses to community health clinics where they're needed most. A spokesman for the governor's office says the state is already moving in that direction. Meanwhile, demand is high at 2 new mass vaccination sites in South King County. Starting today, the ShoWare Center in Kent and the General Services Administration complex in Auburn will be set up to vaccinate 3,000 people a week. You'll need to meet the state's eligibility guidelines, and you'll need to book an appointment online. And don't delay. Both sites are already booked up into the second half of this month. And days before Seattle area grocery workers are set to earn an extra $4 an hour in hazard pay, one local chain is asking to be excused. PCC says that out of more than 1,700 workers, it's seen just 3 dozen cases, none of them tied to stores. The co-op says margins are already slim, and it will be further hurt by the pay increase the Seattle City Council passed unanimously last week. PCC is asking Mayor Durkin to exempt independent local grocers from the pay bump and focus on getting all grocery workers vaccines as soon as possible. 7 counties in western Washington are waking up in Phase 2 today. That means starting today, you can hang out with more people indoors if you want to. Gyms and restaurants are allowed to open at 25% capacity if it's worth it for them. But Republican state lawmakers want the entire state reopened. The governor is taking heat from his own party, and the reopening could go away at any minute thanks to this new COVID strain. KUOW's Olympia correspondent Austin Jenkins is here to explain. Austin, appreciate you taking the time.
It's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
So this move into Phase 2 was a little bit of a surprise announcement from the governor last week. What changed?
Well, what changed are the rules of the road, or the goalposts. Essentially, what the governor said is that instead of a region of the state having to meet 4 of 4 reopening metrics, now regions only have to meet 3 of 4 to advance to Phase 2. So he essentially made it easier to go from Phase 1 to Phase 2. Of course, this comes at this moment that we're in where we have this new, more contagious variant of the virus, and at a time when case counts are still quite high.
Okay, so 7 counties are moving to Phase 2. What about the rest of the state? Where does this leave them?
Yeah, so right now the Puget Sound region, King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, and the West region, that's Grace Harbor, Pacific, Lewis, and Thurston counties, are eligible to move to Phase 2. The other 6 regions of the state are kind of stuck in the mud, waiting for a couple more weeks to see if they can improve their numbers. Now, for those going into Phase 2, this does mean starting to reopen. It's not a full-blown reopening, but as you noted, restaurants and gyms can resume service at 25%. Aquariums, theaters, museums, other entertainment venues can also start to reopen, 25% or a maximum of 200, whichever is less. Also, outdoor youth sports competitions can resume, which could be really important for kids, who've just been struggling to do something besides what my kids do, which is play video games all the time. So, that may give some families here some hope, like, oh, my kids can get back on the soccer field kind of thing.
I could imagine if you're in one of those other counties, you're not satisfied. What is the chatter you're hearing about the governor's new plan? Because it seems like he's getting some pushback, especially from his own party right now.
He is, and this is significant and noteworthy that he's getting pushback really for the first time in a very visible and strongly worded way from 3 Northwest Washington, Olympic Peninsula rural Democrats. And rural Democrats are an endangered species in this state anymore. So these are the 3 that are sort of hanging on in public office in the legislature. And they put out a statement after the governor's announcement that said that this just isn't working for them, that they believe that this regional approach is overly broad, that it's penalizing citizens and businesses in two of their counties, Clallam and Jefferson, that they say have faithfully complied with the governor's orders. And in their statement, they said that throughout this entire pandemic, they've stood with the governor and supported the difficult decisions he's had to make, and that they believe a unified response is important, but that they have, and this is strong language, they now say they have lost faith that the governor is on course to safely reopen. Very interesting, very surprising to see this. But again, these are Democrats in a part of the state where the economy is, very vulnerable, and no doubt feeling the disproportionate effects of this pandemic after all these months.
And how's the governor responding to this?
Well, very forcefully backing his approach and saying that, this approach to look at reopening on a regional basis, not a county-by-county basis, was because the regional approach is how hospital systems work. They serve regions, and they were very concerned about health system capacity. He's also saying that for this particular region of the state, they had increasing case rates, increasing hospital admission rates, and that signals that the disease growth is worsening in that area. But again, all of this is a judgment call. Whether you do this county by county or region by region, how you draw the regions. And I know that when people saw the regional boundaries, it raised some eyebrows the first time. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. The governor and his health advisors decided to do it this way. They certainly opened themselves up to criticism. What the governor will keep coming back to is that Washington state has fared better than the majority of states, that this is about saving lives at the end of the day, and that the best way to have an economic recovery is to have a recovery from the pandemic.
One thing is clear, though. We are not vaccinating enough people right now. We simply don't have enough vaccine to do it. And it is still unclear what the new coronavirus variants mean for the trajectory of the caseload. Why did the governor decide to make these changes right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly pressure has been building on him. There's been a lot of criticism from Republicans and now an increasing number of Democrats questioning this approach. So there was pressure to bear. But at the same time, it also seems like they probably realized that meeting 4 of 4 criteria, nobody was budging. Nothing was happening. Nobody was moving into phase 2. They were looking at the numbers every week and nobody could quite get there. And so if you can't get there, would you start doing a little bit of bending of the curve, changing the rules? And it seems like that's part of what went on here. Yes, they're saying that more people getting vaccinated is a reason why they felt more comfortable doing this. But to your point, the numbers are still quite low. I mean, we're nowhere near herd immunity in any of these regions.
Yep. Well, Austin, here we are in phase 2. I wonder how long we're going to get to stay here.
It's a very good question. I think this could be a case of whiplash where a couple weeks down the road, the numbers aren't good and you're right back to phase 1. And in that sense, there's not a lot of wiggle room here. I mean, the governor himself said that it's a very precarious time. And so if this variant kicks up, if hospitalizations and ICU bed capacity are being impacted, you could see counties and regions that have moved to phase 2 be right back at phase 1. On the other hand, if we want to be optimistic here, maybe we'll see another region or two get into phase 2 a couple weeks down the road.
That would be great. Austin Jenkins is KUOW's Olympia correspondent. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Seattle Now is produced by Jason Pagano, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Clare McGrane. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.